The National Youth Organizer of the NDC was the first to take on the Agric Minister for his comment. On a Facebook Live video, Mr. Yamin said the only reason Bryan Acheampong is getting away with his comment is because the leader of the NPP, as well as the president of the country, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, has set a bad example.
This country will need to be saved, and it will be saved with equal measure. It may be sending this signal. Look, we as NDC, me as a national organizer, will not be leading the NDC into the next election only for Bryan Acheampong and the NPP to just make useless statements like he has made. And this is not the first time. The first person who made that statement, unfortunately, is coming from the President of the Republic. And I wonder why we didn't hear people with conscience speak against the President's statement. You see, that is the hypocrisy you find in this country. That you have men of God, you have civil society, you have whatever, that will not see wisdom in criticizing the president when he makes statements be like that. And you see, the military training that we have is talking about leadership by example. So when the leader is making such statements, unfounded, uncultured statements, then Korano will do the same, because it's the leader that is telling them what to do.
The NDC has since issued a statement asking the IGP to arrest the minister for his alleged treasonable comment. Speaking on Joy News, Deputy General Secretary Mustafa Gbande said the NDC will not entertain any form of intimidation from the NPP.
What officials of government have started doing is just an indication of failure. And they have realized that the only alternative to power is to breed violence as they have done in the past. But I can assure them that we live in a country that has been very peaceful, a country where there are many people who have lived to see this country develop to this extent. We will not allow hooligans.
Featuring on the probe Sunday, April 9, with Emefa Apawu, MP for Ebuakwa South, Samuel Atachia, said his colleagues' comment have been taken out of context. He wants the public to ignore.
It's been taken out of context. I was on the stage, actually. There was nothing fiery about it. It was just in context that like you having a good fight, I'll beat you to pulp. If you said that, doesn't mean that you're going to use violence or anything. It's a political language. So I was a bit surprised that people are giving it some violence undertones and all that. He never, exhibited anything which was of violence in character. So I was surprised. He was surprised. But I was there listening to what he said. We will not let you come to power. What does it mean?
That they'll never hand over to power.
Of course. That means we'll break the 8.
But founding member of the NPP, Dr. Yaho Tamaklo, will not consider the comment lightly. According to him, he cannot sit down unconcerned in the face of such, quote, destructive political statement by some recalcitrant element in the political class. Without doubt, the statement by Bryan Acheampong can lead this nation into destruction beyond the extent the Akufo-Addo government has caused, unquote. He noted in a statement he issued. Security analyst Dr. Ishmael Norman has called on the IGP to invite Mr. Bryan Acheampong for further questioning. According to him, the comment may have security implications regardless of the intent of the speaker. He spoke on Joy FM's Super Morning Show with Mamavi Owusu-Aboagye.
There is a thin line between energizing the political base and weaponizing them. If this kind of talk continues, then Mr. Acheampong himself will be considered to be an unethical political leader, because political leader would adhere to the rule of law and comply with what they say. So both of them cannot afford to alienate us, the population or the voters. So for the meantime, I think it's just posturing. However, the security agencies must be super alert.
Featuring on the same show, Executive Director of the Institute for Democratic Governance, Dr. Emmanuel Akwete, called on the president to intervene.
I think the person to speak is the president on this matter, and his ability to dismiss it as not his policy is extremely important, because he took action against Bryan Acheampong. The committee report, you remember the short commission report on what happened and how they were mobilized and so on.
Now that, as you may have guessed, as you've seen us going down that alley, is what we're going to be addressing. Bryan Acheampong, his recent outburst, as some would paint it. Attention has been drawn to what happened in Ayawaso West Wuogon many years back. Some say that was just the tip of the iceberg, and that now we're seeing similar scenes being, well, proffered for the future. But others have said this is nothing more than political talk. It is mere rhetoric. It is just on the back of some utterances from the other side, the minority NDC, to which he was also responding, saying, we're not going to allow you to have your way in 2024. But that sort of confidence in saying this will happen or this will not happen. It's said in our local parlance, if a blind man says he will stone you, then his foot just might be on a stone. What is the picture? Let's introduce our guests joining the conversation this morning. And we have Dr. Kwame Asah-Sante. He is a political scientist and he is head of the Center for European Studies at the University of Ghana. Doc, a very good morning to you. Thank you for joining the conversation. You would have to unmute, Doc. We can't hear you.
Yes, I have done so. Good morning, Ben, and good morning to Mr. Acheampong.
Mr. Richard Acheampong, a very good morning to you. All right, Richard Acheampong has not unmuted. We'll try to get him. He is Director of Communications for the new Patriotic Party, and he's been saying a few things on the back of those statements by Bryan Acheampong. I'll get him to come and substantiate some of what he said and why his positioning is what it is. But let me start with you, Dr. Asah-Sante. At the bottom of all of this, when you heard what Bryan Acheampong said, regardless of what the NPP has said, what the NDC has said, what the civil societies have said, even before all of that, what was your candid reaction? What did this mean for you as someone who follows the political space, who knows our checkered political history and how far we've come? What was your reaction?
Yeah, Ben, my reaction was very simple, that it was a veiled political threat. I mean, nothing.
What did you call that? A veiled political threat.
Political threat. Yes.
Right.
Why am I saying that? I want to look at this from at least about 2-3 perspectives. All right. It is part of the propaganda techniques that politicians rely on when they are engaging, campaign and elections and the rest of them. All right. And this one, if you look at from propaganda perspective, there are a number of techniques that political actors employ in elections or in campaign. And one of it is what we call the appeal to fear technique. All right. They rely on, this logical and idea to put fear into people, let you behave in a certain manner that the person who sends the message is able to arouse fear, create panic within you, and for you to do his bidding. All right. And that's it. That's one aspect. Another aspect is that when you look at it from the point of view of power, we are saying that power is the ability to influence the course of people's action. So there are one characteristic of power is what the influence dimension, that
the subject, that is the doer of the action, causes the victim, who is the recipient of the message, to behave in a certain manner. That, if you look at this statement from that perspective, it tells you that, yes, you want to influence the voter in a certain way, but that one, it doesn't carry any vote, any threat. The where he comes out with something that, well, we use all means to maintain power and the rest of them. We can look at it from what we call the threat of sanction, use of power, that whoever is issuing that instruction or making that statement is saying that, yes, if you don't do A, I will also do this. But that is not what he said. He said we use all means. So I call it veiled threat, because if it's not veiled, veiled means that you don't want people to know the real threat that you are issuing. You are hiding something. But if you mean business, come out and tell us that NPP will not hand over power when they lose election. Then the statement is made. But that is not what he said. So if you look at all this thing, my understanding is that, look, it tells you that, one, once you issue statements like this, it tells me that, one, you don't have any message for the electorate, and that you want to rely on propaganda, the fear factor, appeal to fear, to, as it were, convince voters or put the fear of God into them to be able to vote in a certain direction, or create even panic that they don't even go out to vote and the rest of them. But you and I know that this will not happen, because this country has gone through a lot of things, and this cannot be a threat that will prevent people from not going to vote. They'll vote anyway. They vote based on their feeling, based on what they see, what they experience. So this cannot be something that will throw them away. After all, we have seen a statement from Rawlings in 2000, even before 2000 a lot, but 2000 that, he's not going to hand over power and the rest of them, and then who is going to inherit the reins of government and the rest of them. The 2000, the forces of democracy whipped him to line. When they lost, Professor Mills was quick to jump into the air and say that, look, I have conceded defeat, and that let's move on. That's a mark of a distinguished politician. And so that's it. If you also want to look at it from the point of view of policy, all right, that what government decides to do or not to do, can you say that this is the policy of government? If you press government hard on this matter, government will chicken out. So this is not the policy of government. So you heard Professor Akwete saying that it's the government, the president, who has to speak on that. He's telling you that public policies start from what? The executive, the head of state. So is that the policy of the government? Can the government say yes or no? All right. When you press government, government will tell you that this is not a policy of government. The best it can be is just an ordinary statement from an ordinary man who cannot do anything. But apart from this, it also tells me that, look, maybe he's having some fears that his party is losing the battle ahead. And that is why he's acting the way he's acting. Because if you go to the electorate, all right, you don't need to threaten them. All that you need is to be able to bring your debate to them. You'll be able to convince them with powerful debate and arguments, so that at the end of the day, they will consider what you have put forward and then give you a hearing by voting for you. But if you send message of threats, though veiled, it will not give you the vote that you want. Let us remember that when people speak, they've spoken, and nobody can change shortchange their position. That people decide that let's look at it from constituency. If you vote at constituency A and then presidential, people they've counted, they voted against your party. And then you go to another constituency, they voted against your party. How can you change people's, will. You can change. You can change it. All right. So I see it as nothing. But of course, the political actors have taken political note of this. But for me, it tells me that it is coming from somebody who is desperately looking for power, or who is desperately want to maintain power, or want the electorate to renew their mandate by hook or by crook. But that doesn't lie. That doesn't lie in his mouth. It lies perfectly in the mouth of the voters. They would decide who to give their vote to. All right, based on what they see, what they feel, and what they know. Let us also remember that aside all these things, there are a lot of things that determine voter choices, and it's not threat. Threat is not one of them. One is what the economy. How well is the economy? If Mr. Acheampong has anything to offer his party, all right, he needs to what? Be able to help his party to move this country out of this economic doldrums. And it's not this type of statement that will do anything for him. The economy is the most important factor to every voter in this country, irrespective of party ideology, tradition, and whatnot. Two is infrastructure development. The Constitution says that everybody is entitled to infrastructure development in his or her constituency. All right. So is that what they are doing? And the only thing he can do to support his party is to support the cause of building infrastructure, so as to what? Endear himself to the heart of many in this country. The third one is what? Issue of corruption. All right, your ability to fight corruption head on gives you the gravitas, gives you the courage to be able to what? Convince voters that this is one of your problems and that I'm able to do for you and the rest of them. So if you want to abandon this and then go for threats, go for statements that doesn't, sit well with what political parties, voters, and the rest of them, then you are shooting yourself in the foot. Apart from that, health issues, employment issues, and a host of them, about 14. These are the things that influence voter choices, not threat. We have gone beyond that, and that is what empty. There is nothing that will influence voter choice. People will vote on that day, rain or shine. People will walk in, go and cast their vote, and they will vote based on the things that I have said.
I will come to you on certain points you've made, but let me bring in Richard Acheampong, who is also with us for a conversation. I hope I can hear him now. Mr. Acheampong, a very good morning to you. All right, so we have a bit of a challenge with his connection. We'll call you, Mr. Acheampong, on the phone lines to see whether that will work out better. Zoom would have been preferable. So let me come back to you, Dr. Asah-Asante. Now, there are some, and I, as a student of politics, have felt, was this Bryan Acheampong? Yes, he's been a ministerial, in that ministerial capacity before, but now, as a fresh appointee or nominee, if you like, who is at post as a cabinet minister, was he just trying to do something to show that me too are they, and I am representing the party, I am doing something? That's the first point. Now, when you say by hook or crook, part of the message I got from what he said, Emmaso and this and that, was that whatever has to be done will be done. And if whatever has to be done, the means could be fair or foul. By hook or crook, which you used as an expression, Doc, means whatever is necessary, fair or foul. Now, the third point I'll make before I seek your reaction, you say it was a veiled political threat. Veiled political threat.
Yes.
Who knows what we'll see when we unveil it. But what is propaganda and what is real? That fine line, how do we define? How do we determine what is just innocuous, harmless, and what could result in an outbreak of violence? And as I say this, Rwanda comes to mind, and let no one get me wrong, but the sort of tenor, the sort of discussions, the sort of rhetoric, part of which stoked what happened there. I don't know. What is your take?
Yes, your observations are right, and they are firmly ingrained in the literature, all right? But what we're saying, the case on hand, all right, tells us that what the gentleman is saying, one, is that the policy of government? If it is a policy, let the government come out. Then we know that, yes, oh, this is a policy. But the government would have been, no government would accept this as a policy. Because, look, it flies in the face of every rule of law. All right, every law, it flies in the face of that. Two, if you are saying this, and that's your policy, and you are going to IMF for, financial bailout, let us remember that one of the conditions IMF and the World Bank they gave to third world countries who were coming for loan was to go and democratize. And that's one thing that hit Mr. Rawlings, who was during the PNDC era was not ready to hand over power to a constitutionally elected government. He said over his dead body. Those conditions whip him to lie. So I'm talking about democratic forces. Do you think the World IMF will going to sit down that you are saying that when you have lost election, they are going to allow you to stay in power? I mean, you have lost. You will go out in the next minute.
Are you suggesting, though, are you suggesting, I get your point. I know what pressure was put on the likes of Rawlings during his tenure because he didn't necessarily want to get into a democratic phase. In fact, let's call a spade a spade. He didn't want to. At the time, he did. Maybe in future he would have wanted to, but he didn't at that time. His hands were tied because of, yes, some of these Bretton Woods institutions and the rest. But are you stretching that to intimate that they have some control over a sovereign country, that if things don't go right? We saw what happened in the Ivory Coast when Gbagbo was president and Ouattara, had come in around 2010. There is that. But there are also examples in Nigeria where people have cried foul, among others. I mean, it's a fine line, isn't it?
It is. But let me tell you, you were talking about sovereignty. All states on paper are sovereign, but some are more sovereign than others. All right. Here we are talking about a confederation, a loose association of states, all right, or groups like this, all right. They have the economic wherewithal to dictate to states and tell them direction they follow, whether we like it or not. So your sovereignty doesn't come in at all. If you are sovereign, you should be able to cater for yourself and not rely on them for support. Once you go to them, they give you a condition. Why don't you say that, well, I'm a sovereign state, I'm not going to abide by that, and the rest of them? Look, you will do their bidding. They will not sit down for any democracy that they have nurtured, they have supported to go down. And that one, it will be somebody's a figment of his imagination. It won't happen. Two, the people of this country will not sit down for you to shortchange them when they have voted for party A, and you are saying that you want to change their destiny for party B. Who is going to allow that? And people will police the ballot. People will be part of the counting process. People will be part of coalition and everything. And so what are you going to do? When they are not even satisfied, the last bit, they go to the Supreme Court and seek redress, where audit will be done in some of these things.
Are you suggesting, Doc, that it is impossible to rig an election in Ghana? Are you suggesting that it is impossible for the powers that be to manipulate the process? Are you saying we have a foolproof system? Because not even the United States has that. And I mention them because while we'll cite the United Kingdom, Britain or England to be specific, as the mother of democracy in modern terms, though would go back to the Greek polis for that, you would realize that even the United States, in the election that brought Trump into power, looking at the Electoral College vote, among others, there were disputes about the reality, but it was allowed to move on. There were claims throughout the tenure of Trump about manipulation by the Russians, so to speak. Are you saying we are beyond all of that with our systems?
No, I'm not. Far from it. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that the check system exists. Are we saying also that there are no check system that we have counted in constituency A and Mr. A has won for the presidential? You think you can change that? And nobody will question that. You can try, but people will stand up and question that using the legal processes and all that. So I am saying that, yes, we are a human society. Yes, people can temper with things here and there. But I tell you, when we want the truth will come out. and that the people themselves will not even, from the word go, allow you to what? When they mean to throw you out, they won't allow you to what? Have your day. No, they will police the system and make sure that we get to the fine end. And whoever emerges winner, he wins. That's it. And apart from all this, we are saying that, look, it is the message, all right, that influence voters. It's not any threat. We have seen threats. You remember 2004, people were saying this country would turn into Liberia. You recall?
Right.
We have said every time we go for election, there are a lot of threats people issue against certain groups of people that they are going to be deported, that this country will be on fire and all that. Thank God we are still in. Simply because, look, it is easier said than done. You cannot, because whether security or whatever, they are all part of what? The political society. And they also care about their society. So you cannot influence them or cause them to do something that is they themselves against their survival. Nobody wants that. This is democracy. Take it or leave it, has its problems, but it has served us so well. We are peaceful. We have become the beacon of hope for democratic enterprise in the sub-region and in Africa. And that you think interested parties will sit down for this thing to go down. Nobody should dare. Nobody should dare. The voters, they are the people who decide the direction of the country and nobody else.
Hold for me, Doc. Let me hopefully get Richard Acheampong. Richard, can you hear me?
I can hear you quite clearly now, my brother.
Great. It's been quite a struggle getting connected to you this morning, but it's good that I can hear you loud and clear now. So let's start from the very start. The same question I put to Dr. Kwame Asah-Asante. Barring, I don't know how you're going to be able to do this because you represent the NPP. You are their mouthpiece. But if you had heard this as a Ghanaian, putting aside whatever lenses or, rhetoric that you had heard out there, how do you feel about it, what Bryan Acheampong said recently?
Well, thank you very much, and a very good morning to Dr. Asante. Doc, I'll call you after this program. Essentially, I would analyze the issue if I were to listen to this and not an NPP member. I would have analyzed it and see where the issues are and where they come from, and then be able to then form a view of my own on the matter. And even now, as an NPP person and the Director of Communication, it is clear to me that the NPP will not do and the NPP will do nothing of the nature that is being insinuated to affect our democracy. The conversation that was had last time was clear, and it was in a nature of trying to clarify a position that others have taken and indicate to them to nip it in the bud, to desist from that line of approach to the elections in 2024, and that will only beget more violence if people are treading on that path. And also the idea that we'll win the election and therefore will not hand over to the NDC. I would have done the analysis and come to the conclusion that yes, given the cause, the effect is justified, and it's clear to me in my mind that the NPP will say that they would respond, or they have the men, and therefore the NDC should de-escalate, or they would win the election and not hand over to the NDC. So I think that the issues are clear in my mind. But the only point where you would be worried is if you are taking the conversation out of context, in which case you will be worried until you are given the full fact or you are helped to situate the conversation in context. I think that's how I would have analyzed it if I were not NPP. But even now that I'm an NPP person, it's clear in my mind that the NPP means no harm. The NPP is a free and fair player in our democracy. We have done that since 1992 when we were cheated. We play by the rules. And up until now, our contributions and proposals have strengthened our electoral processes. So there is no way in anybody's world to imagine that NPP, the party that has done so much to strengthen our electoral regime and make sure that this democracy continues, will be the one to adversely affect it in 2024. It is not us. We're responding to a certain conversation that we find problematic. And the person who started that, the cause of this conversation, is who needs advice.
The person who started this conversation is the one who needs advice? Is that what you said?
That's my position, yes, please.
I see. You talk about the context of what Bryan Acheampong said. What for you is that context? Please make it clear for us.
And so there's an ongoing conversation. I think that I start from, and then I'm looking at the conversation to say we have the men, and if you have other questions, I'll answer from that discussion. Yes. So the first day or the night or the morning when Chairman Asedu Nketia took the podium after having won the election, he promised that they are on a certain path to win Ghana's second independence. I find that very offensive because Ghana's independence is intact. For anybody to suggest that they are on a crusade to win a second independence for Ghana, for me, is offensive. Especially when their tradition has nothing to do with the first independence of Ghana to suggest that they're on a path to win a second one. So that was a very brash talk, saying that they will sacrifice everything, and I've seen version of the video of the night that says they will sacrifice everything, including lives. And I don't know who they are contending with, on whose behalf, or who's engaging them in a fight so much that they need to sacrifice life to win anything. Democracy doesn't require that, but that's the conversation they're having. And so that's one. And then the flag bearer, His Excellency, the former president, also on the campaign talk since his launched his campaign, has been talking about we'll march them boot to boot, boot for boot, do or die. And I'm wondering what exactly necessitates that conversation, or is anybody saying anything to them about violence, for which reason they are preparing and offering proactively that they're going to do boot for boot or do or die. And so that creates a certain atmosphere. And on Saturday, the response was very clear to say that you've been saying all these things, and all these things that you're saying, it's not as if we don't have what it takes to also speak like that. So the context is that if, conditional statement, if you are going to use patapa, if you are going to use ehunehuna, if you are going to use nkwasiasem in 2024, we will show you that we have the men. In other words,
I don't think the N word you just used, the nkwasam thing, is appropriate for radio or TV.
It's our language.
But
because that was what was spoken. So I'm literally just quoting for you. I don't know how to change it for you in speech and translating from the local language. Pardon me if that is in bad taste. But literally, that was the conversation that was had. So to be able to paint a graphic picture for you, the speech suggesting that if conditionally, if this is what you are bringing, didn't even say that we would give you or would attack you or would do anything, saying that we'll just show you that we have the men, is a response to a conversation. In that context, must be clear. So if it's a response to a conversation, then we should find out from the originator of that conversation to say that, are you committed to the do or die you are promising? Because we just had a group respond to that conversation. So that if to cure this thing, you go to the source to say that please de-escalate. Please go back and rescind what you are saying so that there will be no response necessary. And in fact, recently, there was an opportunity offered for that conversation of do or die to be rolled back. But a former president refused to do so. So if he refuses to de-escalate, naturally, for self-preservation purposes, you elicit a certain response. So it is almost involuntary on us for self-preservation purposes to serve notice to the NDC that your talk, we have taken notice. The way you are speaking, assuming that there is some violence coming, which we don't know anything about, but if you keep talking like that, we don't know what you have seen. In our local parlance, they say if a blind man wants to, hit you with a stone, it's either he's holding the stone in his hand or his foot is on the stone. Now, these party is talking violence all along, shouldn't it be necessary for us to let them know that please de-escalate, stop it? Because we too
so without claiming that is true, even if it were the case, and the remedy is to meet violence, purported violent talk with violent talk, right? I'm sure you've heard of two wrongs not making a right before.
Certainly, I agree with you. But what we said last time was not a violent response, is just to let you know that we've been hearing you talk this violence. But just know that we can defend ourselves. It is not offering violence. It is saying that we too are capable, okay, of defending ourselves if what you are offering, you actually make good on it.
Right.
So now you see. So
let's make tracks, Mr. Acheampong. I get the point you're making. I would like to make this. In the news review, I asked for your comments. I'm asking for same again. I see a number of you contributing on social media with interesting and varying thoughts. I would like a lot of you Ghanaians watching us this morning to get interactive. Let's speak up. Let's know what does this bode for us. And the people of Abetifi, which is the constituency that is represented by Bryan Acheampong. For those of you there, I would like to hear from some of you. Maybe when we activate the phone lines, who knows? We just might activate the phone lines in the course of this conversation or later, or you could send us a message on social media. I'd love to hear from you. How do you feel about the statement made by your member of parliament, and is it reflective of what you are thinking? But back to you, Mr. Acheampong. You spoke recently on the back of this, and you made mention of the NPP's commitment to free and fair elections, but that you would, however, not tolerate violence. And you made mention of the NDC matching the NPP boot for boot in the 2024 elections, as per the statements that had been made, attributed to, or in fact, uttered by former President Mahama, and that the NDC would not joke in 2024. Did you find those comments inflammatory?
It was scary. If inflammatory is less threatening, I'm saying that they were scary to hear that. Because look, as a consummate believer in democracy, I think that democracy, per all standards, is supposed to engender peace, right? And so democracy, we shouldn't have in any part of it having the kinds of conversation the NDC proactively is offering, to say boot for boot against who? That they will sacrifice lives or sacrifice their lives. For what reason? Just to vote?
I have heard members of the NPP in the past say that whatever it took, even to the point of shedding their very lives. It's not a new rhetoric, is it? I've heard stalwarts in your party say.
Well, but wait for it. Wait for it in the NDC. Now, of course, if I am from NPP and I'm threatening violence and you hear me, you just know that I'm not born out of violence.
I see. So there's a distinction now.
No, yeah, because that distinction is necessary because the former president forced us all to make that distinction because he says that they have revolutionary roots. So that you have two distinct people. One who has a disposition, okay, to orchestrate violence, and he's proud of that disposition, and one who doesn't. So the person from my background, who is not of a revolutionary route, when I'm talking violence and all that, you can just say that I'm just threatening for no reason.
Right.
But one who says so and emphasize to you that, yes, I have a revolutionary route. When that person is talking, you take him serious.
I see. Whether that is or isn't, rhetoric is rhetoric, and it must be taken seriously, just as I mentioned the Rwandan example. But I was premising what I said. No, hold on. I was premising what I said. So you say that you found those statements worrying, troubling. I'm just trying to, because I've forgotten the exact word you used.
Very scary. I use scary.
Scary. Did you find it inflammatory, insightful, scary, when you heard Bryan Acheampong utter what he did recently? Did it scare you in any way, shape, form?
No, it didn't.
Why?
Because he's responding to a scary statement. To let a bully finally knows that, okay, well, the people you've been bullying in the park, in the school park, or in the backyard, suddenly have decided to straighten their backs up and let you know that they won't take it anymore. So it didn't scare me. In essence, it gave me an indication that yes, the NDC would now begin to tone down and know that they can't continue bullying forever. So that, for me, was the context. And you see, the unfortunate thing is that the media conversation is putting a certain slant and emphasis on what Bryan said and not on what the NDC said. The response is rather now the cause. But there's a cause to this conversation, and that cause is the former president. So let's begin to have that conversation in context to say that somebody said something. What he said, is it okay? And now the response here, is it justified?
Don't you find it interesting, Mr. Acheampong, don't you find it interesting that the comments of the former president didn't seem to have stoked conversation, stoked the ire, so to speak, of the people like the present comments of Bryan Acheampong have? Don't you find some disconnect there?
No, in fact, it actually just tells me that where the media is paying its attention.
Civil society organizations have jumped on this forcefully.
Yes.
Forcefully.
I see that.
You can say what you will about the media, but civil society organizations, a number of people, prominent people, one of the founding members of your party, Dr. Nyaho Tamaklo, has come out to lambast your party, cut your party, so to speak, for some of these comments and all of that. He is not a member of the NDC, is he?
No, he's not. And so so the media is supreme, right? The media is king. So if this morning you have brought the two issues on table and said that, look, we see what Bryan is saying as a response, justifiably as a response to the threat that is proactively being offered. That threatens the future peace of the state. And I'm sure that my father, Dr. Nyaho Tamaklo, will be listening and say that, so this is where this thing is coming from, right? So if you don't serve the two issues, there is certainly a cause to the matter. The response cannot become the problem. The response cannot become a problem when the cause exists. So let's deal with the cause. Now, the issue you are saying about the former president's comment didn't elicit the same level of concern. It did. He was given opportunity to say the things you are saying are too brash. Can you rescind those ones? Can you rescind the do or die thing? He said no. He was poking at the studio desk and said, no, he will not, because the election is critical. But nobody is fighting in advance. So they are creating a certain outlook. That outlook is political. That outlook is to create a sense of urgency.
Right. To
escalate a certain atmosphere. And if they don't de-escalate, they are going to walk us all into trouble.
Right.
So the response that has come now, if we want to do our democracy a service, then we then have to hold a conversation and have the parties be held accountable. And to begin with this accounting process, you will have to find out where this thing began from. And it began from the end.
Just hold for me. Hold for me, for the benefit.
Let me just land for you. If we're not putting the emphasis where it belongs, we'll be blaming the wrong people, creating the impression that what NPP said is the problem when the cause exists, and you'll be there and you have an infraction or some kind of problem happen, then we would have shot ourselves in the foot because we failed to focus on the cause of the problem. The NDC must be told plain and simple that de-escalate, stop talking violently, stop promising this future violence, because nobody is offering violence in 2024.
All right. I think your point is well made. Let's
to de-escalate.
I want us to just perform this simple exercise. I want us to watch briefly, and it's so short, what Bryan Acheampong said exactly. And I'll come to both of you, gentlemen, Dr. Asante, Richard Ahiangba, for us to peel it layer by layer and maybe find whether it is as innocuous as we say, or whether there are gray areas we need to pay attention to. Ghana 4, let's watch this video.
Power, I'm my NDC.
So interesting commentary. Two things. So first off, that will come and stand on any platform and hand over power to the opposition NDC. It will never happen. And then again, he says that whatever means must be employed to maintain the NPP in power will be employed. Based on what? You made the analogy about a blind man suggesting he would stone somebody. It would either be that he had a stone in his hand or he had his foot on a stone. Based on what can Bryan Acheampong, Richard Ahiagba, make such categorical statements?
About doing whatever it takes to win 2024?
It was basically like saying by hook or crook, by means fair or foul, we shall win, wasn't it?
Well, what he says is clearly what a political party should aspire to do, is to do whatever it takes to win political power legitimately in the democratic context. And if you look at our long history, this Fourth Republic, that suggests to you that it is appealing to Ghanaians, it is campaigning hard, it is ensuring that the electoral processes are firm, independent, so that every vote will be accounted for, and ultimately NPP will cross the line with 50+1 and win the elections. That's what Bryan is referring to. That's what we believe in the NPP, and that's what we have done from the start of this Fourth Republic. So he wasn't saying anything that we don't believe in. And so I think that is as simple as that. It should be clear to anybody as daylight that we are going to do whatever it takes. And in fact, to contextualize it for you, you remember during COVID, the president in this what has become known affectionately as fellow Ghanaian addresses talked about how is it that we know how to bring our economy back, but not how to bring people back to life when they perish. Country. There hasn't been any point in time where a government had to give free water to people, free electricity to people. There hasn't been in the history of this country a situation where people were shut in their houses, the economy came to a screeching halt, that this economy was not working. But we came to that point, and government did whatever it took to be able to preserve our livelihoods and save lives. And that is the mindset we're approaching the elections with. And in context, again, when Bryan was speaking, he did say the challenges the economy faced. Before that, talking about how is it that in 2017, 18, 19, when we came in, the economy was growing up until that glitch that happened in 2020, and then subsequently 2022 with the Russia-Ukraine war, all totally vanquishing all the gains that we've made and the momentum that we have built for economic growth. But now that we are reorganizing, historically, this debt restructure never happened in our history. Government is investing and taking all the tough decisions to ensure that as a country, we go back to the good place. And that is what he's talking about, that this government, this NPP party will support this government to take all the necessary legitimate decisions to ensure that we bring back this economy. And in bringing back the economy, do all to ensure that we win the 2020 election. Recently, you saw the story that we've been pushing, or that has come, of taking on a life of its own, that it is possible that the NPP can win 2024. That is the spirit. That is the mindset, that we believe that is possible. That we believe that it's possible to bring back this economy. And we believe that it's possible, if we bring back this economy, we can win 2024. That is the mindset. That is the leadership Bryan was providing to tell us that yes, NPP, it is possible. Things may be hard today, but it is possible. Things may be difficult for Ghanaians, and they are complaining, but it is possible that we'll restore the economy. And he talked about how, at least by June, the IMF will come support us, and then we'll be able to build back to a good place.
He could have said all of that. He could have said all of that, including what boons we would get from the IMF, without saying some of the spillovers. He could have just said that we'll get the economy back on track and we would win. But of course, it's his choice versus what anyone else may think. But I wanted to bring in Doc. I'll just bring in 2 quick points. I want you to address this incisively for me. I'm curious if the people's vote, the ballot, is what is supreme. How can he suggest that we'll never hand over power to the NDC? Those were his words. We'll never. No, hold on. Let me make my point. If you have any interventions, then you can come through. So, suggesting that your party would never hand over power to the NDC and that it would never happen. If the people's ballot is supreme, how can he say that? And secondly, we've been talking about former President Mahama here, some of his comments in the past. If former President Mahama had said what Bryan Acheampong said, would you be reacting the same way? 2 questions, quick one for you.
So before that, I'm just saying that next time we have a walk in Peru, it will be 2024. I'll invite you and have you on the platform, see how you say it differently.
I am not a politician,
the
fortunately.
that you have raised. Yeah, so just for the exercise of it, so I see how you will say it differently. The point that you raised about, NCDA, if you are a political party and you have won election or you are going into election, what will be your mindset? That we are going to lose, so we hand power over to our opponent? No, you won't do that. You're going to the election to win. And that's why every election is a 50-50 chance. Even you saw NDC in 2020, when they knew they had lost the election, they went to court. So that is a political party psychology for you, right? They lost the election. Now we know from Chairman Asedu Ketia's commentary that they know they lost the election. Even that, they subjected Ghanaians to a legal process that wasted our time, but they knew they lost the election, which simply tells you that the psychology of a political party or for any human being going into any context, your hope is to win. Otherwise, you are not alive. Otherwise, you're not a political party. Your objective is to win. So the psychology is that we will win in 2024, and we will do all it takes to win. So we're just not saying we'll win, but we'll do the work it takes to win. Simply, that's what Honorable Bryan is saying. So if former President Mahama is saying it, yes, it is a political party. They want to win. So I won't be surprised. What I will do is that I will charge my own party people and say, look, we need to go out there and win this election. It is a battle for the votes of the people.
So in other words, just to contextualize, if former President Mahama had said this, you would have no problem with it. It would be okay.
He's been saying it.
Let's put this into a certain box. Forget what he has said. Forget what he will say. I'm saying if he had said this a few days ago, it would be okay. Just confirm that for me.
Say what exactly? That they will win the election?
Exactly what Bryan Acheampong said.
Yeah, that we win the election. That's what he's saying. Otherwise, he will not be contested.
That it wouldn't ever happen that the NPP would win, and so they would not accept anything, that it had to be them. Would you accept that?
But you will not accept to lose. You remember in this country in 2016, you remember a comfortable lead after they have seen the
I think we should move on. The media often is the unfairly adduced whipping boy of both political sides when it suits you. That tag will not stick, though, I have to tell you fairly, because when President Mahama uttered those comments, I don't know whether you ever watched this platform or listened to our partner stations on radio, to suggest that we didn't talk about it or make all the noise, the furore about it, would be a bit, I don't want to use that word, but would be a bit politically incorrect. And unless you don't want to, you can go into the archives and find that, respectfully, Mr. Acheampong. But the point to be made is that even if someone were known to be violent, if I know someone who is very temperamental, and I know that the least thing triggers this person, assuming it were the case, I wouldn't do certain things in a certain way because I knew how the person would react. So if you fight fire with fire, you know what happens. Everything burns. But let me bring in Dr. Kwame Asah-Asante for a quick point. Doc, are you still with us?
I am with you.
Having listened to everything that has been said, especially by the communications director of the New Patriotic Party, is there any missing link? Is there something we are missing? I played the video again, and then I picked out some salient points, two of which I put to Richard Acheampong. I, in fact, asked him that if former President Mahama or some other stalwart of the NDC had uttered those statements, would he readily agree with them? And he intimated that it would be okay. What is your take?
I have said from the word go that what the minister was saying was nothing but, a veiled threat. It's empty, because what really influenced voter choices is not threat. I mean, you can't threaten anybody to go and vote which direction. No, people vote based on what they see, what they feel, and they manifest themselves in economic messages, in messages that resonate with the people. They also manifest themselves in infrastructure development. The record there is what we...
Hello, Doc. Well, a bit of a technical glitch there, some connectivity issues. I'll just pause a bit, see whether we can get Dr. Kwame Asah-Asante back. He's a political scientist and head of the Center for European Studies. Doc, can you hear me now? Dr. Kwame Asah-Asante's connection is still problematic. We'll try to get him back because I wanted to run a number of things by him. But Richard, just as your connection was impacted at the start and I had to focus on Dr. Kwame Asah-Asante, I think it's only fair that I come back to you now. When Bryan Acheampong said, quote, "We have the men," please clarify. We have the men to match violence with violence, or we have the men to do the job? I want that clarity. And on social media, listening to the commentary or watching the commentary of some people have said, is this what you present if you have the men, where we find ourselves economically speaking, looking at the inflationary rate, which is still astronomical, looking at the exchange rate, which is still very problematic. The last time I checked a few days ago, the pound was up to about 16 cedis, thereabouts, in terms of street value. Looking at the number of taxes that have been heaped onto the banking sector, the businesses in our country, the ordinary Ghanaian who may have taken a loan facility, looking at the myriad problems, health, education, shortage of vaccines, which we're resolving, among others. Some have questioned the "we have the men" mantra. What is your reaction to that? Can you clarify what he meant?
Thank you very much. I just want to say that I wasn't referring to multimedia necessarily when I say the media.
But we form part of the media, so you can't take us out. You said the media.
Well, yeah, so then that also lets you know that it's not all the media that is doing the work you're doing. So the point is that whatever you have done, there's always room to do more, right? So it is important that we aspire to the heights. So if there's a conversation that is two-dimensional and you're just focused on one dimension, it calls for that guidance to say that why are you fixated on the cause, why are you not fixated on the cause but on the effect? So it is a guidance issue that I'm saying. Even if you have done it, you can bring it forward and say, okay, well, now we have two issues now going together. This is where it began, this is where it's headed, so please, can you de-escalate? That is just the guidance I'm saying. It's by no means to question what you have done as if you're not doing anything. You see, the issue of we have the man, it is simply to just let you know that we will not offer proactively to be violent, but will resist any appearance of violence that would jeopardize our democracy. Quite simply, that's what it is. Now, in terms of what you're saying, to say that people say if we have the men, why are we in this economic situation? This issue we have gone over and over and over, except that somehow in Ghana, when we have conversation, we don't continue. We always go back and start from the beginning. This issue should be clear by now in this country, that yes, we are here because of COVID-19. Yes, we are here because of Russia-Ukraine war. This is something that the NDC has been talking about. It's infected the media with it. Now today, just when they had their press conference, they were saying, oh, Ivory Coast, they were saying this, they were saying that. Ivory Coast is with the IMF. Now, it is a global situation. Just today, I was here in Congo, they have the issue with dollars. Recently, we have, they can't even pay salary. We talked recently about Kenya. They are struggling. Okay, so it is a global issue that is come to our door. Before that, we have the men. Yes, we have the men. And when we took over in 2017, this economy, we inherited it at 3.4, 3.7, variously looking at, depending on what series you are taking, at 3.4. In 2017, this economy grew by 8.2%. This economy grew again in 2018. We have the men. The men were doing the work, and the economy was growing. Up until COVID-19 came. So if you see that the economy grew 2017, 18, and 19, and you're making assumption moving forward, given the momentum of a 3 fiscal year growth, you're making any momentum, even if you have your eyes closed, and you can just touch the numbers, you will naturally, inevitably say that in 2020, this economy was going to grow again. But this economy didn't grow in 2020. Why? Because COVID happened. In fact, after COVID, we started picking up. In 2021, this economy...
Some would also tell you, especially as you make those analogies, in fact, throughout this period, I think I just missed the date, I think it must have been 2012 or 2014, we had probably the biggest growth in terms of our GDP that we've experienced in about 15 years.
2011.
Thereabouts. And hold on, others would also say, making the point that you were merely a beneficiary. The economy was already on a front foot, recovering when you took over. You remember the IMF deal and what results we were already getting. You remember the oil situation. So you came and inherited something. You benefited from it from 2017 moving onwards. Not necessarily that you did anything special. This has been corroborated by economists that we've spoken to from different academic institutions in Ghana. It's been corroborated by some civil society organizations. So when you make that point, I just had to situate it in that context as well. If we're going to cry foul about COVID and Ukraine and Russia, then we might put it into that context as well.
Okay, so that's fine. But you know, the 2011 GDP growth, 14% that you talk about, okay, that was on the back of, commercial oil production in 2010, 2014, 2011, then it went up. That's okay. But you know what happened after that? The GDP of our country decelerated, declined, all the way down to 3.4. It never grew. It never grew. So then you can see that there's a management impact there. The factors were just not left to themselves and they were working. If the factors were left to themselves and they're working, you will assume that the growth that we experienced in 2011 at 14, it will continue. But there was an intervention, there was a management in place that couldn't keep those factors going. So it's a management issue that you have attained a GDP performance of 14% and you watch that decelerate all the way consistently. Former President John Dramani Mahama, when he came to office in 2013, right, the GDP he inherited was 7.3%. He never grew the economy beyond that. declined all the way, year in, year out, declined all the way. Okay, so that is not a question of inheriting anything.
It's interesting, isn't it? You wouldn't consider the circumstances then, but you would consider the circumstances now as some sort of excuse. Because, to be fair, whether you're referring to Rawlings, Kufuor, Atta Mills, John Mahama, or Nanado, you've all had your own plagues, depending on what the situation has been. You remember the Kufuor gallons. There was a situation. Kufuor did amazing work in Ghana, but there were situations that, brought economic crises at a point. Atta Mills faced them, Mahama faced them, Doomsday, and so many other things that happened. And so why, in bringing to the fore what we're talking about, I find it problematic sometimes when we try to decontextualize. You will all have problems. So if you have the problem of COVID and the Russo-Ukrainian war, tell me, why should that be exceptional?
I am one person who any day, doesn't matter how the argument is going, I would want you to contextualize the argument. So I'm not sure what decontextualization you're talking about. So if we are going to contextualize the conversation, contextualize it in Mahama's time, let's have that conversation and see what was happening and if that justifies the output he gave Ghanaians. And then contextualize this conversation and see what is happening, see if the result we're getting is justified. Okay? But I'm telling you that you will agree that never in your life have you seen a situation where the global economy came to a shutdown, that this country was locked down. You've never seen that. I've never seen that. Okay? You have never seen a situation where in the developed economies, they are having to deal with unprecedented levels of inflation, which is cascading and affecting us. You have never seen a situation in this world where all of the economies will have to go to IMF. I think the number of countries going to at last check is in excess of probably about 30 or so countries going to the IMF at the same time.
That is definitely not all countries, is it?
But I'm saying that the total number of countries going to the IMF is unprecedented at the same time. So the point is that you are at a certain pivotal point in history that things have gone completely out of alignment. And this one, you don't need a newsmaker or the news teller to tell you that there's something happening in the world. You just feel it. You just know it. That here today in the United Kingdom, people are demonstrating for cost of living because inflation has eaten away their earnings. Inflation has taken away their purchasing power. So therefore, they're demonstrating. I was in the UK on the 18th, and we're having a program. People could not come to the program on the trains because on that day, the train workers were demonstrating. Because why? They want cost of living adjustment. Because why? Inflation has eaten away their earnings. So this is a catastrophic global event that needed a response. That response is being offered. Right? And so here in Ghana, you don't have to dream it. You don't have to have anybody tell you that this is what is happening. The only thing is that we needed to support our government, but the politics of our country is taking the best of it. So the production this time from 2017, but for the men we have, you wouldn't have gotten the growth that you got sustainably 2017-18, especially when the economy you inherited was not on an upward swing. The economy was contracting. So to turn around a contracting economy and make it into a growing economy takes a certain doing. This is what I think we need to emphasize. NDC, when in 2009 they came, they inherited an economy that was on upward swing. So they had momentum behind them to push that economy forward. But when we came in, we had an economy that was decelerating. Economy that was contracting. So if you are able to turn a contracted economy around in 1 year, if you want to be fair, if you want to have an objective conversation, it cannot be that the economy just turned around because of good omen. No, it turned around because people put minds to it. And that's how we got growth in 2017. That's how we got growth in 2018. That's how we got growth in 2019. And now the history is clear. The happenings is clear to you and myself that in 2020, something happened. And I was going to tell you that whatever happened in 2020, this government regrouped and put policies in place in 2021. This economy went back to growth. And that growth in 2021, 5.4% GDP. And the last quarter of 2021, you have 6% growth, indicating to you that you are on a momentum. 2022, you are going to keep growing.
All right. So
the problems with it, February 28th, where Russia-Ukraine happened, put everything again out of alignment, and that's what we've been dealing with. And this government is committed. We're not making any excuses. We're committed, taking the tough decisions, and we believe that things will turn around again because we have the men to do it.
You have the men. It's just because we've exhausted our time, but maybe I should find time and sit with you and have some more of these discussions. There are other things and other comments. Unfortunately, I can't read all of them. I'll just read one at the tail end after Dr. Kwame Asah-Asante makes his final remarks. Doc, we've exhausted a bit of time.
How random are you going to choose that? Is it going to be very random, or is going to be some intentional picking of that one?
No, so there are a lot of comments, especially aimed at or directed at Richard Acheampong, but we don't have the time for that. But there's one that is general. In fact, I could just read it now. It says, it's from Maud, who says, "We should love Ghana more than our political parties. Oh, this is not funny anymore. Please, we have nowhere to go if you destroy this beautiful country." And I think that is addressed to both sides. And that is why I said, because those that are addressed directly to Richard, it may mean there would have to be further deliberations. We don't have time for that. But I felt this one was very general to both our big political parties to take note of that. And that's why I said that would be the only comment I would read. Doc, your final comments, please.
Happening said that one is nothing but propaganda, just to put, if you like, the fear of God in people to vote in a certain direction. But that will not happen. The legislature doesn't support that. People don't vote based on fear. They vote based on factors just as messages that you churn out that resonate with people. All right, the economic messages, messages that relate to infrastructure development, the fight against corruption, issue of health, and the rest of them. Not only that, but people vote based on, or the parties win power based on your resources, your strategy, and then your manifesto. Any other consideration, consider it was secondary. It won't happen. Because if you were to use threats, all right, nobody would have stayed in power forever, all right? But threats do not influence voter choices at all. People have threatened this country time and again. It never worked. The people went to the polls, voted according to their conscience, what they see, what they feel. That is what is going to happen. And people are vigilant because vigilance is the price of liberty. People are going to make sure that nobody's will be shortchanged in that direction. So I believe that all these things is much ado about nothing. It's just empty noise, just to, heat up the political system. But that's
so when my apologies. Just give me a yes or no to this. When Mr. Akwete of IDEC says the president must speak on this matter, do you think it is important or not?
I was talking about policy. I have already alluded to that. And that if you look at it from the point of view of policy, it's what government decides to do or not. Would government say that this is what they want to do? Government cannot come out and say this, and government cannot make it its plan. Never. Then it's not a government that we are talking about. All right, that is a democratic government. No, so it can only be somebody's statement is making. But we want to I want to serve this message to the two parties and all the parties that nobody wins power without what? A strategy, without message, without resource, and then without credible what? A message that really resonates with the people.
Right.
If you don't have message and you want to go on this route, I'm afraid you won't achieve anything. Threat can never change the course of the people's destiny. It's the people who decide, and when they decide, it's massive.
Dr. Kwame Asah-Asante, we're immensely grateful that you took the time to stay with us on this conversation. When the Zoom link fell off or got impacted, you came back. Thank you so much for your time. He's a political scientist at the University of Ghana and head of the Center for European Studies. Mr. Acheampong, I would really appreciate it if you could make this really brief, especially as the connection to Doc had us have you for a lot more. Just very briefly, concluding comments.
I just want to thank you and reiterate that the New Patriotic Party, our history is evident that we are for peace, we are inherently democratic, and will support this Fourth Republic to persist. But then there's a conversation that must be had. That's a broader conversation to say that the NDC must de-escalate. They are the ones who have a revolutionary route. They are the ones day in, day out threatening this country and our democracy with violence. They must stop talking that way and let peace prevail. Thank you.
Let peace prevail. Richard Acheampong, Communications Director of the New Patriotic Party. The verdict is still out there. I was hoping to hear from some members of Bryan Acheampong's constituency in Abetifi. I didn't see anybody identifying himself or herself as such. We'll take a breather here, and when we return, we'll be telling you about the health workers in Jantwa Krom, a remote farming community, and how Zipline's drone system is helping them in their work. Do stay with us on the AM show. We'll be right back.